Maggie. Sorry, no worries.
Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody, this afternoon of our fourth meeting, I think. Welcome to anybody who's joining us on YouTube, on Zoom, on whatever you are there. I see you were there, Hillary, before. I don't know if anybody else is there.
Yeah, Hillary's on, Plowman's on. And looks like Brady Powers is coming in.
Okay. All righty, welcome, everybody. So I will need a motion to adopt the agenda for today.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Agenda approved. Public comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd just like to note that we do have two sets of comments that had come in. They're lengthy letters, and so those are included out, and I will make sure that everybody gets an email copy of those as well. They're a bit lengthy to read out right now, but everybody will get a copy of those. It's from Orvis and Donna Lunke, and then Maggie Barnard. Two of them.
Okay, so they'll be in our packet next time.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other public comments from anybody? Ryan in the corner, and he writes a lot, so. Okay, moving on to number 4, update on vacation rental dashboard.
Yes. Thank you. So we do have a dashboard to share with you guys today, and Tim's gonna pull it up, and then I'm just gonna kind of walk around it a little bit. And we'll send you guys a link to this dashboard. And you should all be able to just go on and do all the same features. So this is very similar to what we have on our post compliance, except for it's just a little bit different in the boxes. Yeah. A little bit different in the boxes that we have displaying data. So all of this is for the assessment records, and this is all the assessment records outside of the city of Grand Marais. So we're showing 336 units, 258 licenses, and 321 rental properties. I think if I zoom out, so this is the most recent spreadsheet that I think everyone got. If not, I can send an updated spreadsheet, but all these numbers will match, and any changes from here forward, I will be manually entering into the database for this dashboard. So it's nice. You can zoom in. If you click on, like, say down here, if I click on just the resort units, it'll take those out. Otherwise, like, now you can see where the resort units are. We did not go specific to RCR. We actually pinpointed the resorts through their parcel numbers. So there are still, we're counting units that are in RCR, kind of different from some of the numbers we had pulled earlier. But so that's kind of a real nice little feature. Then if you zoom in, you'll notice like some of these parcels are highlighted in blue and some of them aren't. The ones that are not highlighted in blue would be like new rental units, like see this one here, that parcel is not highlighted. So this is really just pulling data from the spreadsheet that I put together and sent over to Kyle for our GIS for our application. The ones that are highlighted in blue are classified as a short-term rental. So any of these real recent licenses, new licenses are not going to already be classified that way. And then you may find some, and specifically within the city of Grand Marais, I'll zoom there. All of those are going to show up as a blue square, but they're not going to have that little logo of the lodging unit on it. And that's because they're not subject to the license and the ordinance within the city of Grand Marais, but all the properties that are classified as short-term rentals are those blue boxes in the city. So any one of these you can click on, and it's going to pull up like assessment information, address, that market value, what the classification is, which is going to be short-term rental on all of them, and then the last sale date. If you go, I'm just going to go show like one more example. If I go down here to Lutsen and I find a house that is a recent sale, I think this is one. So you see how this one is not classified as a short-term rental because it's so recent. They pull a license on this property. It's got a license number. This one is assessed at 239.7. So I have a link for the, I should have a link for the VRBO ad. This one, it doesn't have it because there is no ad yet. They pull the license, but they haven't put it on a platform yet. But any of the ones where if they're valued under $300,000, which we actually had a tough time finding one under $300,000, we were looking before this meeting. So I'm just gonna go down to Wildwood Acres and pull up a property and show you. Because I did make comments on the properties that were assessed under 300,000, kind of using that as like a affordable housing metric, the median home price in 2021. So this one, you can see it has an estimated market value of 240. It sold for 213 in 2020. And this one, I made comments that it's a 918 square foot modular house. It was marketed for 7 months and sold below the list price. That was 2020. So there is a link here to the Airbnb ad, and this property is not currently licensed. So there's a lot of information. If you click onto the parcel, you'll also see any of these ones that have the logo and the blue square. They have 2 tabs up here. So the information on this screen is being pulled directly out of our tax system. And then the information on the main screen is being pulled out of the spreadsheet that I've shared with everyone and what built this dashboard. But a lot of useful information, and we'll make it available to the committee as soon as the meeting's over. In fact, we'll probably send out the link. I will say that it's going to be changing and getting tweaked a little bit, like an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago, when I first took a look at this. The number of rental properties and the number of licensed properties were displaying the same number. It didn't have that unlicensed category, and it didn't have this category, which shows the percentage of properties by the number of licenses they have. So it's being evolved right now as we speak. Kyle's still working away at this thing. So yes.
2 questions. So number 1 for Joe, is the unlicensed number match what your department says?
I haven't had time to look at everything. I mean, I started looking at this before the meeting. And I could tell that it would be very helpful because I can go in and I can pull information off of this. But it's a moving target right now. For instance, we've got a couple non-compliant properties that I sent letters out to last week that I just talked to the property owner today. One of them's registered, the second one will be registered later today. So it's something I need to sit down and maybe work with Bob, and we'll compare these and make sure we have, that everything is in agreement. That what he's showing as classified as a vacation rental, if it doesn't have a license, we need to know why.
And I'll make one comment on that, please. So anything that I found is non-compliant, I try to include that link to the app. So that's kind of the check and balance, that if I'm saying it's unlicensed in this data, you can actually go verify that that property is being advertised through the advertisement that I would post the link to. The exception is like in Chateau Lebeau, it's almost impossible to know what unit is what and who is advertising what. So, I mean, Chateau Lebeau, they're all classified as short-term rentals. There's no homesteads in there. And that, we're just kind of winging it. We're assuming that they're all rented.
Okay. And then the second clarifying question for the city of Grand Marais, are those included in the unlicensed number?
No, so the numbers that were displayed on the dashboard are all just Cook County jurisdiction. The only reason that the city of Grand Marais actually shows which ones is because they're classified that way, which it's actually kind of nice because it doesn't include it in the data that, we're using to set benchmarks and things like that. But it is something that somebody can still go and verify, like, hey, do they know about this property? The one thing I will say is with any unit in the city of Grand Marais, they don't need a license. The city doesn't require it. They have certain zones that they can operate within. So we will hopefully have it picked it up for the next assessment cycle. So the Grand Marais parcels will not change on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. They'll be updated on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you.
Just quick, I just want to say, thank you. That's could be super useful.
Yeah,
And it looks as it's getting built out and tweaked over, always figured out what's, we're looking one more up or whatever. I think it's great. It's really good tool. So thanks. Just a quick clarifying question on the Grand Marais thing too. And again, I know that they don't fall under the jurisdiction of the county for the licensing purposes. But on the map, I just want to make sure I understand this right. The ones that are classified as short-term rentals, that's done voluntarily through the CRV process. So what I'm trying to capture is that that's not all inclusive by any means of what's actually operating probably in the city limits. It's just what has been indicated by the transaction that's going to determine.
Correct.
Okay.
It's what's classified on January 2nd, 2022. So, there could be some that have dropped off, there could be some that have added. And to be honest with you, I haven't actually gone through and done an audit of the city of Grand Marais. Occasionally I'll go and look because it's really, if we get a CRV, like you say, we call and do an interview with the buyer and we ask them how they're gonna use it. And that's where we're making our classification determinations. Maybe every once in a while we'll go through and see if there's anything we can pick up in the city limits because, anybody who isn't familiar with it, when they are renting short term, it does change what they pay in property taxes. So we want to know. We want to know when they're using it that way because they actually pay a little bit more in the local tax rate and they pay into the school school and hospital voter group referendum. So it's always important that we know that they're used that way. Thanks.
Would it be important to have the city of Grand Marais properties categorized somehow on your list separately so that people aren't confused, that they aren't part of the totals of Cook County?
I can check with Kyle. If it's a real simple, just, this site displays Grand Marais and this site displays the county. I don't know if it's that simple or not. Kyle was really the brains behind setting this application up and getting it to present the way it does. I know he said that the less frequently that we have to upload a new spreadsheet into it, the easier it is. So what we've agreed to is that he's given me an access where I can just go in and if I get a new license, new property, I can put in all the same information that I have in the spreadsheet. And then that will just start displaying as a new, it'll just be constantly updated. It's only a link. You don't have to log into anything. You just click on the link and it's available. In fact, it might even be available if you do a Google search. So.
Steve?
So the locations of the vacation rentals is public information.
It is, and actually it's been all along. If you go in through the tax parcel finder app, you can see how they're classified.
Okay.
It's
I just
part
wanted
of the
to
tax record.
issue a caution that there have been problems elsewhere in the country where thieves have used that as a way to figure out an intermittently occupied property and just think we should be careful about that.
And similar, to like a cabin property, they're all, it's part of the tax record, how the property is being used as a classification, so. I've heard your concern and I did address it with Attorney Hicken, but it is public data.
All right, anything else?
All right, any other questions for Bob on that? We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
That is a very good tool, will be helpful for us, the committee and going forward.
Yeah, I'll send the link out to everyone and I'll include the most updated spreadsheet and then it'll just be updated probably weekly from there.
All right, so I wanted to touch on the last meeting we left. We're not gonna have a discussion about this because we discussed it a long time at the last meeting, and that's that whole caps and limits thing. And we left it for us to kind of figure out. So we're just letting you know what it is that we determined would be a fair, what we consider to be a trigger. And then that would institute further discussion into the potential of setting hard caps and limits, because that's a much more deeper involved conversation involving, where it would be appropriate, where it wouldn't be appropriate and such. And so what we did is got together and looked at the number of actual rental operations that are ongoing right now, whether they're licensed or unlicensed. We kind of take that number and then take 10% of that number, and that would be the trigger cap, or not cap, but the trigger, at which we would then have further conversation about it. But then in also recognizing people's concerns about, oh, there's too many, there's too much, we can't, maybe it doesn't reach that, or people are going under the radar and such, we decided to also add in a time cap or a time trigger where no later than January 2nd of 2023, we would also revisit the issue. What? 24. Okay, thank you for that correction. So it would be 10% on top of the numbers that we have now for January 2nd, 2024. So we will be revisiting this issue. It will be talked about again, so it won't, it's not as though we're kicking the can down the road. Yes, Scott.
Is there an actual number? Do you have that yet or not?
This is the, and this is the difficult thing. This is why this is a really good tool between this and host compliance for us and Joseph and the license, all of this getting together. We will have that by the time, because this, we can have further discussion about this. It's going to be presented back to the committee when we have the full report ready to go in front of the board and the committee has the report. We'll be able to kind of ask questions about this or that and the other. By that time, we will have a hard number to work with. That would,
So of the 75 unlicensed, should those, I mean, should it be the cap be 36 units for example? And then the 75, or then, you know, the non-compliant start to kick in and compliant. How do you treat those 75?
So that was what we did discuss, that we were going to include the unlicensed units that we're aware of. I do anticipate that when this is reported in the local media, people who are unlicensed and currently operating without a license are probably going to make the effort to get the license, because, you know, for $200 plus whatever the after the fact fee is, to get your license secured, I think is valuable, you know, considering the discussions that are going on of a trigger and a cap and all that. We do anticipate that there will be some new licenses coming on, just so that they can get into the door of the rental. But the number we're looking at right now is that there are 348 roughly. Like I said, the ones I haven't gone through and verified are like the Sevilla units and a couple of other like little smaller, like the Heritage and the Gull Harbor, all these little condos where you can't tell who owns what. Those are just the last. I probably have less than 10 or 15 to verify. I might end up just sending out letters from my office. But 348 is the number we have, so it would be a growth of 10% over that, which would put you up to 383 units.
okay, Jason, I really didn't want to have a big long conversation with this. We will touch on this and we will have hard numbers. We will be able to rationalize or justify what those numbers are. But we, as everybody here knows, we so easily get down those holes.
Not gonna run, I promise. I'm not gonna dig into it. I just had thought of one thing, talking with a colleague today, actually. They mentioned thing, and this is a clarifying question maybe for you, Bob. HOAs like in Caribou, Highlands, like they're individually owned units that are then rented short-term rental, right? And each of those that operates has to have a license, right? But then there are things like the Poplar River condos, which are all HOAs that don't have licenses. Like, is that included in those unlicensed figures? Because that's like 72 units by itself.
It's not, because they're currently managed on site with on-site management.
But that's going to change soon.
Right.
So and I guess that's the larger point. I'm not trying to, this is a
Not
management
on-site.
question. It's offsite because it's across the river.
Yeah.
And they have to, anyway, it doesn't matter, it's changing. I guess my point is, when we're looking at like, why would Caribou have licenses for individual units and then other ones don't? And I just wanted to make sure we're building margin into the cap in case those need to get licensed. Because it should be irrespective of management, every unit that could be a home should be, you know, have a lot, in theory, that's what seems to make sense.
And that's a really good point. And that kind of dovetails into another real quick thing that I wanted to touch on is that we are basically talking about two different types of operations, those that are associated with resorts, and whether they're self-managed or managed in HOA or whatever the case may be, from those that are vacation rental homes. And so there's been the suggestion that we maybe even talk or have a smaller group get together and talk specifically about those that are associated with resorts. And we can hash out provisions that are specific to them that don't necessarily really pertain to the types of concerns that we've seen in the surveys, the community survey and everything like that, that we can kind of separate those two discussions. So I think we'll have a discussion with a smaller group on the resort level, self-managed, that group, and then have the larger discussion in here about the vacation rental homes and the provisions involved in that. And kind of pull it together and have it all ready for the next meeting. And in that one, I would anticipate we certainly would talk about that. That's why I was really reluctant to say, yeah, the number is this, because there's a lot of variables.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure we don't cap it too low, and then we're like,
Yeah.
oh shoot, there's like 100 more units that we need to, That's all. I just want to make sure we're thinking about it. It sounds like we are, so.
Just to clarify, the Copper River condos, they're currently with the resort and they're going to not be managed by that resort.
They're owned
And that's the
independently.
concern.
Yeah, it's so an HOA, like any HOA has individual units that are owned by individuals or
Right.
entities.
Right.
Yeah.
This-
Yeah,
Management.
I would
Uh,
just like to,
Just a minute,
Just
Hillary.
a second, Hillary. There's a management question that I was trying to understand, and does it matter who's managing it? If it's an individual home that is being short-term rented? Like, is it, and then been treated as if it's been managed under a resort, so Luton Resort manages Poplar River condos until November 1st, and then that's changing management. So apparently at that point, it gets triggered that they've all would part of license. The question just largely is, if it's an HOA, even if it's managed by a resort or not, if it's individual homes that are being short-term rented, should those all get licenses? And I just want to make sure we don't cap it too low, so then there's like I said, 100 or something units that, don't get to get rented, even though that's the original intent, that's how it's always been used. I just want those homeowners not to be kind of shorted.
Exactly. Okay, Hillary.
I just wanted to continue moving on, because when you think about that, really what we're working on is developing a policy and procedures for vacation rentals. And that, and some of the data that I saw from Bob really indicated that the percentage of our housing stock that's even within vacation rental properties is really quite small. It seemed to me that really what we're doing is putting together a policy and procedure, because one of the issues, larger issues, is the percentage of homes that are second homes, which is really large in this county. So I hope that we continue to not focus on caps as much as we move into what are the policies and procedures we would want, because it's a small percentage of our housing stock. And part of our issue is not as much VRBOs as it is second homes in this county, which we really can address in the same way. So I just want to keep moving forward till we finally get to a couple other the items on this policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hillary. And the only other thing that I'll throw out there is that I have been in conversations with Minnesota Department of Health. They are interested in participating or joining us in discussions on this. They were not able to make the last meeting or this meeting. They are going to be able to make a future meeting, and it's going to be our regional representative and his supervisor. They're going to come and talk. So it's actually kind of pretty good that they would be on hand to be able to discuss that relationship between what it is they do and what we do and what their expectations are and our expectations. So that is forthcoming. I do have buy-in from them to participate in that. And the only other thing that I'll say, and this is kind of a bridge into getting into the actual grid now. Now we're going to turn the page and we're going to get into provision. One of the things that I want to throw out there right to begin with is the one on septics. And I know septics has been a pretty big issue. And anytime anybody chimes in terms of ideas or comments or feedback or anything, septics is always a big part of that. And as I explained at an earlier meeting, we purposely left out septics from a county management level just because of our Lakeshore Septic Compliance Program and the work that needed to be completed on that. And we left it up to the Minnesota Department of Health to go ahead and regulate their level of septic compliance. And their level of septic compliance is, as long as they have a compliance certificate, which could be 25 years old, it's good for them. So what we're going to throw on the table, and I don't expect much pushback for this one. There have been other suggestions out here, but what we would suggest, since we're wrapping up our Lakeshore Septic Compliance Program, is that we go ahead and we impose a requirement in the ordinance as a performance standards that all vacation rentals have a current certificate of compliance. And so then we bring it into the county fold. There was some concern about staggering, making sure it's not all due at the same time. But if we say current certificate of compliance, it's automatically staggered because different people have had their septic systems updated or upgraded in kind of leapfrog fashion. So there's a lot of them that are out there that have their certificates of compliance that are current. We have, and we wanted to leave the time frame for that, not like every 5 years, but in conjunction with the time frame we have in our septic ordinance. So what it's good for homeowners, it's good for everybody. It's the same level of time frame. You have so many years after it's installed, and then you have so many years after it's inspected. It's two different time frames, but as long as it's current, if it bypasses any one of those timelines, then it needs to be, at least have a compliance, inspection and then upgraded if need be. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I know that was one of the major ones.
Is your office gonna be able to keep up with that?
Yes, because we're not. There are discussions about reinstituting another type of lakeshore septic compliance program, because we did that initially. There are two different kinds that counties generally impose. The state DNR has a requirement that the pollution control agency triggers for upgrades of septic systems, but the DNR has for lakeshore, which is what we are. The trigger that you have to have anytime anybody pulls a permit for anything on their property, or the county has to have some type of systematic upgrade program. So most of the other counties, a lot of the other counties have adopted a point of sale because they figure money's on the table, it's a good time to address it and everything like that. Well, when we originated the Lakeshore Septic Compliance Program back in 2000, we looked at the limited resources that we have in the office and said, why do we want to spend our resources out in the middle of 160 acres where there isn't any shoreline or anything like that as a point of sale? Why don't we focus what limited resources we have on the areas where it impacts the most, which is the shoreline areas? So that's where we would pick a lake. Every 2 years, we would inspect the lake and then they would have 2 years to upgrade. Then we pick another lake and go on and so on and so forth. Now we're at a point of evaluating, do we pick something like that up? Do we do something modified? But if we do have this, I believe we can keep up with that and have a modified inspection program in addition to the state required triggers as well. Thanks. Long way of saying, yeah, I think. Yes. Any other questions about the septics?
I'd like to comment on that, if you don't mind. The major problem with the Minnesota Department of Health regulations is they require a certificate of compliance. I've mentioned this before, that may not be current. In other words, a new system that's 10 years old or less, and a septic system that's been inspected for 6 years in the last 6 years. So they may be getting something, they may get a document from a property owner where that system was put in 20 years ago and they had a certificate of compliance and nothing's been done subsequently. There's been no inspections or anything. So, so that's part of the issue. The other part of it is we have rustic properties or systems, properties with lake water systems or carry-in water where the state does not license those. And they're falling right into a gray area. So there's nobody looking at their septic systems right now. So I think that this is a very good idea to have.
All right, thank you, Joseph. So what we'll do then is turn the page, and does everybody have a copy? You should have a copy. And I also did include some packets, and if anybody in the back there needs any of the meeting packets, they're on the back table by the sign-in sheet, as well as the comment letter that had come in from the London. So to start off, we did have some initial discussion about that. What we're going to go through is this grid, and what this grid is, this spreadsheet kind of grid of boxes are, you have the list of provisions that are on the left-hand side. That's where they are found in the ordinance. It basically just follows right along with the ordinance. And you have the provisions, you have what the provisions are, you have the citation, what the provisions are, and then I had just kind of plugged in from our perspective, what we would look at, but we're certainly open to talk about anything that anybody has with regard to any of the provisions. We had talked about definition a little bit, and I think, as I mentioned, we're going to have some discussion separately for those that are resort-based, self-managed, all this, and I know there's concern about that we probably would end up with a different definition for those than we would with the regular homes or cabins. But pulling it back, and I hope people have read through these a little bit. I will say the intent of this with the definition was keeping it in line, of course, with the Minnesota Department of Health. It's a 7-day thing. We chose 30 days. Anything less than a 30-day time period. We chose to eliminate the bed and breakfast because that's already a conditional use permit in most all of our zone districts. But then we had that modification at the end that describes those managed or regulated as a part of a hotel or resort. So if in looking at just kind of the whole part of it, does anybody have any issues and things they want to talk about with that particular definition?
But you're excluding the resort piece, that would be an.
Yeah, the resort ones, we're gonna have a further discussion. And I suppose as a part of this discussion, the longer that I hear the silence, the more I'll take that as a consensus. And as like, we're already moving pretty good here. Into the next section, 3.1. No vacation rental may be operated without a valid vacation rental license issued pursuant to this ordinance. I mean, I think that speaks for itself.
So moved.
Yeah, okay. And really what we'll do is go about, and if anybody has, I'll read through these, and if anybody has any objections or things they want to clarify or have any questions or modifications, just go ahead and jump in. Section 3.2, all existing vacation rental operations as of the date of the ordinance, blah, 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 shall be licensed within 5 months of the effective date of the ordinance. The enactment date is blah, blah, blah. And I basically just wrote in there to update those dates in there. So when we reinstitute the ordinance, then there's a new kind of time frame, and everybody has to be on board with those dates. Anybody have any?
Well, only minimal comment is just for 5 months. We may want to tie it to whenever the cap is going to start.
Well, if we adopt the ordinance, which it has to be effective by January 1st of 2023. Then you're suggesting maybe 2024 as, because January 2nd of 2024 would be that
Yeah.
time.
As long as it's less than that, that's all I'm saying. It's like if the cap is gonna, if we're saying the cap is 10% above the current number, and that's like we're saying 370 units, whatever. We want to make sure that.
But no
they-
later than that.
Right, we want to make sure those dates coincide, otherwise we're gonna say they have 5 months. Oh, just kidding, you didn't get your time, thinking on time. We're out of.
Okay, so if we had that 5 months, but no later than January 2nd of 2024, we think that would.
Sure, so I just want to make sure the dates line up so that it's not confusing.
Okay.
Why are we giving people any more time?
Yeah, I'm not arguing to give them more time.
I mean, why are we including 5 months?
Well, we don't.
Past when we started running.
That language was originally put in there for the first year of operation.
Yeah.
When we had to educate people, and we gave them till the end of May to get registered. Subsequently, if you'll go down here to 3.5, it says we've amended it. So the vacation renewal period is December 1st of the 1 year to January 31st of the year of the license would be valid.
But I get your point, Mike. It's like, okay, we did that to begin with. Now everybody's had notice for 3 years. Why give them another 5 months to be able to operate and do that? I get that too. As far as we're concerned, we're gonna be hunting the track and, with these tools that we have. We could reduce that to 60 days or 30 days or whatever the case may be. And you can come up to the table. You're a certified alternate.
Didn't Anton join today?
What?
Is Anton not online?
No, he's not online.
I'll come up with that anyway.
All right. Okay, so do we want to modify that to 60 days then, or
I think less is probably better.
less is better?
60's fine.
Okay. It was good to me too. Okay, section 3.3, all the vacation rental operations as of the date shall obtain a license from the county prior to commencing operations. And I think we're good on that. Section 3.4, separate vacation rental licenses required for each unit on a parcel that has a vacation rental operations conducted on it. So that means different for each unit on a parcel. We go on later to say there's no more than two units per residential parcel.
Tim, I just wonder if we want to also clarify in that section, the difference between a duplex or a resort with multiple lockout units. So I think we kind of treat those differently.
Well, duplexes require conditional use permit, in most zone districts.
Yeah.
Where multiple lockout units within a resort, we don't even have. I mean, unless we actually inspect the property, we wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
And we could have that in with the resort provisions.
Yeah, I think so.
Any other questions on that one? Okay, 3.5, all vacation rental license shall expire the last day of each year. License renewal applications the following year must be submitted between December 1st of current year and January 31st of the renewal year. We had that further on to begin with, and we amended that to shorten that time frame up. And a lot of this, and I know there were comments that had come in and suggestions of tying these things, and we'll talk about those with regards to lodging taxes, making sure that's up to speed. And I know we have Brady online, and there's definitely work and coordinating work between us and the auditor's office to make sure we can streamline that verification of lodging taxes from everything, because I know that's a pretty big issue. Okay, so the requirements of the license, and I was wanting to talk to, from the time that you had mentioned it, like the first two meetings, I was wanting to talk to host compliance to see, they're the ones that go in and they change our stuff around in terms of what those fields look like and how they can manage that. I want to make sure that we have a good understanding of exactly it is what you were saying to begin with, so that we know how to kind of modify it. Because as you were saying it, I didn't really see any objection in my mind about it, but I just want to make sure we understand that, because this one, 4.1 says the name, mailing address, email address, telephone number, and the owner of the vacation rental home for which license to be issued. And you were saying what?
I was saying that, that whoever manages the units should be listed on the license, whether that be whoever reports lodging tax should be the same person that's listed on the license, should be the same person that's posted by and marketed. So that they can be, for auditing purposes, you know that Bluebird Lodge or whatever is so-and-so. And that so-and-so is remitting lodging tax, just for streamlining. I think it's important that all of the information is not the same in every plan.
And if I'm understanding what you're saying is who's responsible for that, not necessarily who's doing it, because, you know, my question to Brady in the auditor's office would be, they're probably getting it from different people, you know, related to the piece of property, but it's ultimately the property owners that's responsible for the payment of the lodging tax. So, but you're saying if we have and I don't know, Molly, maybe, and I hate to just throw this at you, but can we have a requirement of somebody else, like a property manager, being responsible for the lodging taxes, or does it always have to go back to the property owner when it's listed on the license like that? So there would be a consistency.
That's something I would have to look into. It doesn't seem like an easy thing to regulate, because the consequence always goes back to the property owner. The property owner isn't necessarily going to be the consequence for not paying tax. So,
Okay, so maybe that may be
really like
an administrative
the
thing that I think we can work out, because I don't think anybody really has any objection to the identification of the responsibility, except maybe Steve.
I don't have an objection, I have a suggestion.
Yes,
I
sir.
think what we're really asking is for both on the application and when we advertise, that the manager should be listed and the license number should be listed. And that's gonna help all of the auditing process, all be able to track it back.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
just
think,
like, if Caribou Highlands doesn't remit lodging tax, Caribou Highlands is on the hook. It's not the individual owners within Caribou Highlands. No, it's, I mean, I think it's the same concept as related to paying tax. I mean, to.
yeah.
How is that usually done? How do you operate your business? Do you pay the lodging tax
Yeah,
for
we
them?
collect and pay the lodging tax on your behalf.
So you're collecting it.
And I guess I'll make a suggestion here is that, because we can't tell Airbnb or VRBO what needs to be listed on their platform. So they at this point haven't really listened to us, but you could make it a requirement that, like, if you have this Bluebird Lodging LLC or whatever it's listed, as the owner or manager on there, there's a host. That is listed somewhere on the license, so we can match these up. Yep. And I do think that when they get a license, they actually are supposed to provide the links to the ads. But probably doesn't always happen.
It's a low ask, and I think it would make everybody's job very, a lot easier.
Yeah.
So,
It would be nice, and Bob, I know you've done some communication with Airbnb at least. Is that something that you maybe reached out to them about as to whether or not they would? If we had a requirement and we showed them the requirement of our ordinance that they have their license number and host information, that they could list that on the advertisements?
Well, Airbnb, so you go through corporate, it's like a thing, you click into all these different things to report a complaint. And, it specifically says if a property is not compliant with local ordinances, you can report a property. I haven't checked with VRBO or the other platforms, but Airbnb, this one actually says it was removed on the 23rd and it was reposted on the 26th, but I told them that in Cook County, you can't rent a recreational vehicle. And they sent an email to me and said, we've informed the host that they need to become compliant with local ordinances. So they obviously didn't really read what I sent them. But then I responded, because you can follow up to their message. And I responded and said, there is no way this can become compliant with Cook County ordinances. Please remove the advertisement. Well, it's still on there today. I don't know that they would be receptive to including that. I mean, these are the same, no matter what state or country or city you're looking at, the platform shows everything the same way. And for example, this one, when you go into the Airbnb ad, it just says hosted by Kevin. And how are you gonna find Kevin? I mean, the property could be under an LLC. You never can tell who Kevin is, but at least if we had a section on the license that said, what is the host display name on what platforms are you advertising? That type of thing.
Yeah. Okay, Jason, then just.
Yeah, just quick into the loop, what they did is as part of the licensing process, you were not in compliance, if you did not include your license number in the title. So it's incumbent upon the actual applicant, so the manager and the owner. So then you get, it's not Airbnb's deal, like if they don't put in the title, but not compliant, you can technically revoke their license. That's probably the fastest, easiest way to do it.
that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Then we have 4.1B is the physical address of the parcel, and PID number of the vacation rental property, and everybody's cool with that. Name, address, and telephone number of the local representative, which has kind of covered all of this. Then we have the acknowledgement of the property liability insurance, and I will say that we did have a discussion at the beginning, when we, in 2015, when we first started this, do we look at how much they need, do we actually get in and verify all this stuff? And, in our discussions with the Minnesota County's Insurance Trust, they advised us, just get a verification of it. It's a self-verifying thing. And then we're not liable for what they, so that's why that section is like that. So anybody have any?
No, no.
Okay.
Can we go back one step to section C? There's been some discussion about requiring a local property manager. Is that something that, in looking at the Duluth ordinances, there's one common theme, you either live in it or you're locally managed. And I think a lot of the concerns that we've heard in these letters and it's being managed by someone that's 5 hours away, that's not connected, that's not available, can't respond. I think that from everybody we've heard, it has been local people that are locally here and want to do a good job managing the properties, which I have no problem with. But
Yeah, well, and hold on a second, Joseph, I'll let you comment, but that's the one thing I did also want to confirm through our the MCIT attorney is to the extent that we can require that. We start getting into some of the commerce issues. I'm not certainly don't have any objections to getting local management. It just makes sense. The way that we have phrased it, and I think it's further on, that we have to have somebody be able to respond, an emergency point of contact that has to respond in so much time. And that's the way that we had covered it when we first did it. And so I'm looking at for confirmation for that attorney. And I don't know, Molly, if you want to comment on that one at all. But that was our concern as to whether we get into kind of the commerce level issue of it, whether we can require a management to be in a specific location or not.
No, I think the best way to do it is to make a more neutral, and objective requirement that best fits the need, and so that would be, are you able to, like, can we cover all those requirements that would be met by a local management without requiring that the manager live in a specific location? That's really,
Go ahead.
So if you ask.
A lot of these properties are self-managed. And if you say to the property owner, we're not gonna let you have a vacation rental license unless you hire a management company, we're gonna have a real problem with that. I think that I can understand the necessity of having somebody that can respond locally. But a lot of people want to manage their own properties. They want to hire somebody to clean it. They want to take care of the money. They want to take care of the advertising. And I don't think it's fair to force them to get a management company to do their work because they prefer not to do that.
I don't necessarily mean management company, I mean somebody that is able to respond to the property. You know, somebody, if that's a word is caretaker or whatever the description is, that would, and maybe that is maybe it is more in-depth of what the requirements are as response times and able to, you know, if my neighbor has a, you know, if I'm having an issue with my neighbor, you know, who can I call? You know, that can respond to that.
So let's say we set up we have to have somebody respond in 45 minutes. And we could ask that question on the registration. Who would be responsible if there was an emergency or an issue on the property? You know, because there's an emergency number listed as part of the registration process. And we could have them list that person that would be able to physically get to the property if there was a problem.
Okay, well, we'll have Hillary, you go ahead and go, and then I'll read the citation that I was talking about the contact information.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It makes much more sense to have the language that you have there, Tim, to actually have a contact that a person who's responsible, able to respond in a certain amount of time to a situation. And I think that's a really good way to handle it. It just, whether someone's local or whatever you have, you need a person who's responsive to an emergency situation. And I like kind of what you've done. And, you know, the only question is how soon do you want them to be able to respond to an emergency? So I like what you've done further down the road here on this.
Okay, I'll read the 5.4 real quick, and then I'll just say, I know, well, let me read it real quick, and then Steve, and then I know a lot of this has to do with kind of enforcement, our ability to enforce that they do make contact or are able to respond. But we basically say in section 5.4, and we'll be coming back around to this, that the owner, agent, representative, or manager of a vacation rental operation shall designate and provide information to the county and each renter for a point of contact that will be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to respond to issues that may arise regarding vacation rental. The owner or manager must respond to a complaint within 3 hours of being notified of the problem, and to respond means to acknowledge the notification of an issue, understanding it may take longer to address the issue. So go ahead, Steve.
So I think what where if you look at Donna's letter here, and we think about the complaints that we've gotten, it's the difference between being able to physically respond and just verbally respond. Because if you've got Kevin here, who's down in the cities, and all he can do is like pick up the phone and maybe answer an email or maybe not answer an email, that's not necessarily going to solve the problem. There's got to be somebody within the county that can physically respond, and they can hire somebody to do that.
Okay, so if it is that kind of response thing, maybe we'll deal with it when we get to that section 5.4. And maybe this one is okay for now. And if we do have to kind of meld the two or discuss the two, then we can talk about it at that time too.
Yeah, my only point was that person should be potentially named in that section.
Okay.
Included in that section.
So Tim, I have a question for Joseph. You're talking about a form. What does it look like? Can you show us what a form looks like that people fill out?
Well, it's an online application.
Okay.
And actually, probably Bob or Tim could bring it up and I mean, if you really want to look at it, but it's fairly time consuming. You have to go through, you have to answer questions on each page. You have to fill out contact information. But it's an online application process that's going through Granicus or host compliance.
I don't know if that would be helpful for people to see the actual form that,
Yeah.
because we're talking about putting on, you know, a host platform and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, actually. We'll figure out a way to maybe print that out, just so people have an idea of what kind of questions we're asking.
Okay, you can have it in the packet next to.
Yeah, I think we can follow up with that. It would take kind of a good chunk of our time
Not now.
to actually work through it right now. Because what that represents is basically, when we went through this committee process before and developed the provisions of the ordinance, then we told post compliance what it is that we wanted out of that form, and then they developed it for us. So they can do the same thing again. So it's, you know, whatever it is we need for them to adjust, hopefully they'd be able to adjust that. So we'll get on to 4.1E. And this is an interesting one, and this is one I really did want the Minnesota Department of Health in for the part of this discussion here. Is demonstration that the vacation rental operation has a license issued by the Minnesota Department of Health or written certification from the property owner that a license is not required by the state of Minnesota, stating the reasons. And therein lies some of the rub. We do consider, in going through this process, we recognize that we are a bit of an eclectic county, and we do allow for and provide and think it's perfectly fine for somebody to live in a yurt and other things, and maybe to have lake water and do whatever that the Minnesota Department of Health says, no, absolutely not. So that's why we added that provision in there, because we thought, well, maybe it's just easy. Sure, you get your license from the state, we'll give you a license. But then there's the kind of category that we do a lot of interim use permit to request for remote walk-in rental sites or remote cabin sites that are just glorified bunkhouses with no plumbing or whatever in it. And we, as a community, thought, oh, well, that's okay, as long as everything is good to go. And so there are categories of vacation rentals that we are okay with licensing, the state of Minnesota is not. And we've run into that, and that's why I think it's good for them to be here and be a part of that discussion. They have informed us that in the past that they're kind of okay with that too. They understand we are unique as a county up in this area. We got the boundary letters, it's all good. And that they have told us that they in turn would honor our license, that they wouldn't necessarily come in and shut someone down or do anything as long as they've gone through our process. And so it's a bit of a symbiotic relationship, but all of that, as Steve knows, you've been a part of like the committees and stuff like that, talking about it for years. They may change. They may, you know, different supervisors may come in, the overall state attitudes toward it may change and such. And so we have to keep that on our radar screen in terms of how we want to be able to deal with this. But that's what the provision is, and that's why it's there for. So does anybody care to have any further discussion about that one?
Just a quick suggestion, maybe, on the application, include, I presume that there are only a couple of little categories that we would all allow that the state would, right? Like you said, like water from the lake, or right, the free water, whatever it is. Can we just put on the application, you know, certifying, they can sign on the application, I certify that I don't require an MDH permit because of the following reason, then you check a box.
Actually, when we go through the registration pages, they ask the question, do you have a Minnesota Department of Health license? And if they say yes, it asks for the license number. If they say no, it asks for the status or the reason why they don't have it. And that's where we get people will put in lake water system or carry-in water. And we'll take that as the reason that the Minnesota Department of Health will not issue the license.
One of the other categories too, I failed to mention was the fact that the Minnesota Department of Health is a 7-day rental and we're 30 days. So if you're between 7 days and 30 days, you still need a license from us, but not the Minnesota Department of Health. They just don't require it. So that's another category. Hillary, it looks like you're chomping at the bit there.
Well, I just have a question for clarification. If I heard correctly, earlier in the conversation, it was said that we do not license campers. Is that correct? RV campers?
Correct.
So do you put yourself in a kind of a potential legal issue if someone says, well, why can't I license my camper if you license other properties that don't meet the state of Minnesota requirements? So I'm just wondering, by excluding one and allowing the other, what if someone challenges that? Is it easier to have a consistent approach?
Well, let me comment on that. The zoning ordinance in section 5.17 lists all the requirements on registering and permitting recreational vehicles. Specifically, it says in that section, no vacation rentals in a recreational vehicle. Then, when we wrote the ordinance for vacation rentals, we also put in there, that's one of the prohibited things. So it shows up twice. And so from our standpoint, this doesn't have anything to do with the Minnesota Department of Health. From the county standpoint, you cannot rent a vacation or a recreational vehicle in a vacation rental situation.
Yeah, and the Minnesota Department of Health is aware, they're very familiar with our ordinance, the way that it is. And so is like I said, the attorneys from the Minnesota County's Insurance Trust, and that's never been a beat from them. We can designate a particular category with the rationale to do so. I know that the Minnesota Department of Health has space limitations per person. There has to be so much square footage per person, and I don't even think campers, unless it's a huge fifth wheel, will even accommodate what their space requirements are. But that's not come up in terms of any type of official challenge or even a potential challenge from the attorneys that we dealt with.
Okay, thank you. That's just what I wanted to know, if someone could argue about them being excluded and it wasn't fair.
Okay, so what I would almost kind of suggest is that we just put an asterisk by this one, because it's between us and Minnesota Department of Health. If they're able to come and speak and talk with us at one of the meetings, then I think that would be one of the key issues that we could talk about in terms of what they do, what we do, and what they allow, and even what they're looking at going into the future as to what their thoughts would be on that. So unless there are any other comments about
Yeah, just thinking through it's Minnesota Department of Health doesn't license lake water systems, for instance.
Right.
Untreated lake water systems for safety reasons, right? So the county, just to touch it, the county is okay with that risk. And I understand, I think there's, a difference between lake water systems at a home that you own and you manage that. But then if it's a rental, you're doing commercial business, people coming in from Twin Cities that have no experience with lake water systems, they might not understand the risks that they're taking if they are drinking from the lake. And I just want to verify the county is fine with that in a commercial setting.
Well, and this is part of where I think we need to go on a number of the things in terms of the point of contact, in terms of some of these things, is having signage up, kind of the disclaimers that have to be posted on the rental properties themselves or the agreements. We can institute what the rental operation has to provide to the rentees.
And currently, is there any requirements for signage on that?
No,
Okay.
no, but that is part of this discussion. That's one of the things that's been in the back of my mind. I don't know when to toss it out or whatever. So I tossed the septic one out right to begin with, because I know that was kind of a big one. But signage, there's a lot of things that we can think about that we want on the posted, in there in terms of the point of contact, 24/7. if it has lake water. I mean, even we're talking about, we've had a lot of comments and feedback with regards to people going in, even into someone's house that is not a vacation rental when they're looking for the actual vacation rental. So having property identification signs listed. So that's kind of a whole category that I want to be able to, so we're going to get to is what kind of signage that we can require on it, because we certainly don't want a situation where people are walking in the door with suitcases into somebody's house. So that's where I put that in that category. It's like, yeah, okay. Carrying water, the state, there's a distinction between lake water and carrying in potable water and such. And so we don't really, as a county, we don't have the food beverage lodging program. We don't regulate wells. We don't regulate drinking water. We regulate human waste when it's done. That's why the septics are big, but we don't actually on a county level, the state does that for the potable water aspect.
But do they want to do it for, would they do it for vacation rentals?
Well, that, again, that's what I'm saying. That's one I want them to be able to have in here. And to be part of that discussion, because in telephone conversations that I've had with representatives from Minnesota Department of Health, they have been fine with carrying in water or lake water with non-potable signage listed on it. So, it's, yeah,
They made me do it.
well, you should do it.
Yeah, I did have to have a potable water system installed, and it was a $20,000 install that Joe knows about. Because we rented it as part of the resort, even though it was owned by another company. My wife and I owned it. It's our retirement home. But we had to put it in because we were under the auspices of Cross River Lodge. We had to put in this $20,000 water system. Pull this lake water off, so.
Well, and therein lies that distinction between the 7 and 30 days. So if it's longer than 7 days, then the Minnesota Department of Health deals with it from a water quality standpoint or a well water division of it. They don't deal with it in a lodging portion. If it's between 7 and 30 days, if it's 30 days or below 30 days, then it's our vacation rental or our short-term rental, but it's not the Minnesota Department of Health short-term rental. Those don't kick in until 7 days or less. So then if we're dealing with the Minnesota Department of Health beyond 7 days, it is their well water division.
Well, the
Nuance. Yeah.
Minnesota Department of Health, the 7-day rule is if you have a lake water system or a carry-in water system or a yurt, we will not license it, but you are not under our jurisdiction if you rent only once in a 7-day period. So you may only rent it for 3 days, but you can only do it once a week. So that's their out. That's how they get around. They basically tell people, no, we can't license you, but if you're doing just one rental a week, then you're not under our jurisdiction.
And this is why it's really important for, I think, for us to get them in to have part of this discussion going on, because there's a lot of the questions and the nuances that we deal with. Go ahead, Steve.
Over the last 18 years, they've changed several times how they've interpreted that, and just in general, having worked with MDH over the last 18 years and served on many committees, there's been little to no change there, and I don't expect that we're going to change much of anything at the MDH level.
And we're not following the 3 days or the 7-day requirement. They could run it twice in the 7 days, and we're not holding them to that.
30 days or less. That's that.
But I will say, you brought up a very good point about lake water systems. Should there, and Tim mentioned, should there be signage posted in the unit saying this is a lake water system, drink at your own risk, basically?
I mean, it should be advertised as well. Because, if you rent it and assume that the water is potable, and that's the assumption from somebody from the Twin Cities would be that the water be potable, and you show up and it's lake water, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, and
Carrying, I think, is a totally different thing. You're carrying your own water in, that's your responsibility.
yeah. So in the section that we're in, section 4, which is the license application requirements, and where we're dealing with signage and everything like that would be section 5. In terms of performance standards or general requirements. And so here we're looking at what the application requirements would be. And I guess I should have said that right at the top here so that we can keep it kind of focused here. So yes, we will have additional discussion with regards to signage and the well water, and hopefully we can get the MPH people in here. So they would want to. And so then we have all of that, or that section 4.1F language at the end, which is all other information that's required on the application. So anybody else have any other thoughts about things to add specifically just for the application requirements? Sure.
Possibly on 4.1C, maybe add a reference to the general, to section 5.4. You have suggested or required, I don't know which way is doable, that this person in 4.1C meet the requirement.
Yeah, we can do that. That makes sense. Okay, thank you. So moving on then to Article 5, which I indicated is the general requirements. So what you see in 5.1A is what is. And when I say it is what is that is just kind of a regurgitation of what it is actually listed as through our zoning ordinance. So if we were to change these, we would also have to change the zoning ordinance. This is been within the zoning ordinance, well, 5A and 5.1B. No, it's Mr. Peter. So, yeah, so those are listed, permitted uses in all the residential zone districts. And I know there's a lot of discussion about, oh, we shouldn't have it in the zone district, we shouldn't have it in this zone district. So they are since 1984, which is the initiation of what we call the modern ordinance. Before that, there was even less requirements, but in the modern ordinance starting in 1984, they were listed as permitted uses with absolutely no oversight whatsoever. So we're actually having more oversight on vacation rentals than we ever have in the history of Cook County. But knowing that there's been a lot of discussion or concern about where they should be or where they shouldn't be, let's go ahead and open this up because we'll have this discussion. And as I indicated, if we do make changes or want to kind of isolate it towards what would be allowed zone districts or not, we would also have to change the zoning district. And if you recall the chart, that was the two charts that were handed out at the last meeting and sent to you, the resort commercial residential and the FAR or the R1. Resort commercial residential and the R1 are the two by far largest categories of zone districts that have vacation rentals to them. So any comments?
Jim, I would just suggest that we put it in that when we have the trigger discussion, we would look at this more closely about what zoning districts. I also want to say that on the dashboard, there is a layer where you can apply the zoning districts to the map. So you can go and see where they're at.
What do you guys think about that? It is involved. If we start looking and carving up zone districts, it does become tricky. Not all R1 is the same. Not all RCR is the same. As we had discussed a little bit earlier, we have RCR that are resorts, but RCR means resort commercial residential. There's a large portion of the RCR that is just homes and residential. That's permitted use. So it would be a much more involved discussion. So the suggestion for Bob is to maybe highlight this as part of the discussion when we have it next time with regards to the trigger, either that 10% or no later than January 2nd or 2024. Are we good with that? Okay. So then, now 5.2, and this is where we get into some of the prohibitions here. No vacation rental operations allowed in a recreational vehicle. No vacation rental operations will be allowed in any accessory structure except a guest cabin. And no more than 2 vacation rental licenses will be issued per parcel in residential zone districts. How do we feel about those?
What's the definition of accessory?
Accessory structure, that is actually defined in our zoning ordinance. Do you have a copy of that, Andy, Joe?
Not on me, no.
A yurt is not an accessory?
No, accessory structures are sheds, boat sheds, garages. Bunkhouses, but a bunkhouse can be a habitable accessory structure. We're actually looking at, kind of defining better or cleaning up some of our definitions on that, but accessory structures are just the storage sheds. Anything, and this is where we had kind of some of the discussion is, we have a threshold. Any accessory structure that's below 161 square feet does not require a land use permit unless it is habitable. So we had some initial thoughts of people saying, well, I'm gonna get a 10 by 16 shed, and that's gonna be a vacation rental or whatever the case may be. No, it can't be habitable. Otherwise, you need a land use permit, and then that would trigger vacation rental license and the rest.
Well, to complicate matters, bunkhouses are accessory structures.
I have the
Accessories.
definition. Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Sam. I have the definition of an accessory structure, a structure on the same lot with and customarily incidental and subordinate to a principal structure.
Yes, and then we go on in Article 16 to talk about that level of 161 square feet and such. They all need to meet the setback distances and such. And we have, and this is actually the state of Minnesota under their Minnesota Rule 6120 provides for in shoreland areas. You can have a main dwelling and a guest cabin. And that's what you have for the full things. Bunkhouses are different because they have no sanitation, no cooking, none of that business to it.
With the, might be new. Guest cabin, is that, I'm just thinking, you mentioned yurts, so somebody has a primary dwelling on a property and then they have a yurt that's like, glamping is a thing. Is that allowed, or is that considered a guest cabin, or is that a different accessory structure?
Go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, well. We haven't ever had that happen. I mean, a glamping operation, if it's a resort, would have to have a conditional use permit. That would be the operating permission for that system. It wouldn't be a vacation rental.
Yeah, the glamp grounds, I mean, we've had a lot of glamping facilities that have come up for interim use permits or conditional use permits that either get approved or denied. But that's not generally used as for vacation rental purposes. That's used as, kind of a larger operation like a campground or glamp ground, to be more specific about it. But it's not to say that if you have a primary dwelling and you have a yurt that qualifies as a guest cabin, that could be used as a vacation rental.
Yeah, that's what I was just trying to understand. It's like, how confined is the term guest cabin? Is it like a little cabin? Is it? Because there's actually just like down my road, somebody's building a yurt right now, and I had the question, wonder if they're putting in an outhouse. I'm like, wonder if they're gonna rent that out, or if that's just gonna be a getaway. Is it even allowed? So it might be good. Well, if it's defined, it's defined, so that's fine.
I mean, if you want to really get into the weeds, is if somebody put up a wall tent on their property and asked for a vacation rental license, would we grant one? And I would say probably not, because it wouldn't meet the definition of guest cabin.
So again, yeah, if the guest cabin is defined, as long as it meets that definition. It's not too restricted to literal cabin minutes.
Yeah.
I'm not investing in yurts, so I'm just curious if that's, there are a lot of alternative sorts of things popping up, like there are new shipping container houses that are, I'm just trying to think ahead a little bit too, that's something gonna be trickling up here, and we're gonna need to address it at some point, so.
Well,
I know the Pincushion the old ski place has a yurt that they're renting, but that's probably considered a resort. I think it's RCR zoning.
right, yeah. Yeah, that's a bit of breakfast up there.
And then we do have properties where it's literally the yurt is the main structure, and those are rented and licensed.
Okay, so we'll be talking about that further again. and frankly, when we get to the end of this, and we're writing our report, we had talked about, okay, we have this trigger. Just to briefly go back, and we're not gonna have a discussion about it, go back to that trigger thing. Once we hit that, either that percentage or the timeline, we're going to have to determine what that group looks like, who's gonna get back together. So anybody has any thoughts or ideas, kind of funnel that to us as well. Because I think that would probably do well to go into the report. Although one thing I will say is that in each iteration, Steve, you can probably count, because you've been involved in every single one of them, is that the issues have been slightly different each time that this has come around. So we've had different makeups of whatever committees to reflect what the issues at hand are. So maybe we don't even need to narrow that down until we get closer to that point. Okay, so anything about the prohibition then? We got those three, no more than two. I know there were some comments about the two vacation rental licenses in each residential zone district. That's per parcel. And that we chose that because that goes along with the lines that the DNR says you can have a primary structure and a guest cabin. And that's where that lines up. We try to be as consistent with state law and rules as possible. Okay, we have that catch-all in there in 5.3. Vacation rental operation shall conform to all existing standards listed in Minnesota statute, rules, county ordinances with regards to noise, sanitation, parking, and trespass. And I know there's been a lot of comments or feedback. You got the survey with the 500 plus comments on there. A lot of that has to do with those particular issues, and it comes down to enforcement. And I know there's been some suggestions here about increasing the fees so that we can increase our capacity to be able to address those. And I know Administrator Yorkie has mentioned the fact that we want to hear and develop the pattern that we or program that we want, and we'll make that work however it's possible. And so, you know, for me, you know, administering the department, I'm always concerned about staffing levels, and I really don't want to adopt something that we're not going to be able to enforce, because that even looks worse. And I would say that over the last couple of years, it's not looked great with enforcement. And that's because we haven't thrown a lot of resources at this. We haven't had it available. So, you know, when we get into discussion of the fees and such like that, I think everybody's kind of agreeing that we probably do need to put a little bit more of our effort into this, as it is such a large issue. So all of these issues, noise, sanitation, parking, trespass, enforcement. That's all I can say is yes. John.
It's on sanitation, one of the complaints that I've heard from quite a few folks over here, some of it in the survey was trash service. A lot of the seasonal places, a lot of the places where people don't live up here don't have trash service. They're not participating in the neighborhood, you know, the lake association's trash program. Is there anything we can do to require that or ask that they do that? Because I know even the Holiday Station in town pulled their trash cans because so many people were using that. I know Steve has solutions for his units, and yeah, I'm sure that helps, but there's a lot of people that aren't going through you know, management service, and you know, if they don't have to, they can tell people to take their trash out. It's caused issues with people up in my area.
You know, that's a really good point. And I think what we can do is probably add that to the application requirements that they describe method of waste removal and disposal. And then also include that in on a signage that they would need to post in the operation as well.
That's what I was gonna say, signage for that. I do know, like, noise, I don't think there's been a whole lot of complaints to our hotline anyway about noise. I mean, I've heard it in the community about noise and things like that, but there are apps out there for decibel levels, and in fact, there's apps that'll send a message right to the manager of the property that says, hey, they're exceeding X decibels. So, you know, we can certainly provide resources for people if there's an issue here or there.
The noise one is always a complicated issue because people have the concept that they shouldn't have to hear anything, and that's not what the standard is. The standard is a noise threshold that's established by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Minnesota Rules Chapter 7030. They have limits for daytime and for nighttime, and you can exceed them for little bits of time and such like that. And it's actually kind of rare is the time where people actually do go beyond what that threshold is. It's a total annoyance. We get that mostly when it comes to sled dogs and things like that, but I've sat on the property lines. And I've sat on a property line with a motorcycle hill climb event because of complaints that were neighbored, and that didn't exceed the state standards at that time. And so it's difficult to rise above that, but people have the expectations. They're coming up to wilderness and they shouldn't have to hear anything. And that's just an expectation that's difficult to achieve.
Tim? Tim?
Yes, yeah.
Al, I started going so late, but I do have a question about this item in section 5.3. It refers to noise. What about other sensory intrusions? And I'm thinking of light, smell, vibration. Is there anything anywhere that would cover those kind of unfriendly, unneighborly intrusions?
Lighting is one of those issues that we can enter into there as well. We don't have, and we haven't officially adopted dark skies provisions, although we've imposed those on certain conditional and interim use permits for operations that have been out there. But we don't have a countywide adoption of like the dark sky thing. When it comes to smell and maybe some of the other sensory ones, that's a little bit more difficult to achieve, but just like there are the sound meters, there are light meters out there as well that can measure the lumens and such. And generally, what we would do is if somebody came in and there was a lot of complaints, this is just going based off of what we have right now. If somebody came in and there were a lot of complaints with noise and light and all of this stuff, we would talk to the person. But then we would also look to perhaps processing something like that as an interim use permit because of surpassing standards. So we either look at one or two things, either withdrawing a license for it or processing it to put limitations expressly on that operation. We haven't done that yet. We haven't really been approached like we were saying. Our complaint line is not run off the hook. In fact, we've mentioned a couple times that the most frequent call we get for complaints or on the complaint hotline, the 24/7 line, is from people as to how they get their license. So it's been more of an informational hotline. And I think the reason that is that most of the complaints probably go to the law enforcement center, not to us.
Okay, so there is a complaint phone line. What would that do? Take a voice message? Okay, that's good, and that would be good to elevate that in terms of communicating it. Is there any format that you take, just narrative?
All right, the complaint hotline, if somebody calls that number, they record the message, the discussion, because there's a question and answer. The person you're talking to, the operator, will ask questions. Well, where's the property at? Where are you at? What's the nature of the complaint? And then I get that as an email the next morning. It shows up on mine as a hotline complaint. And that will give me both the capacity to click on the recorded message, and also it gives me just a kind of an abstract of what the call was about. And the one question that's come up, or the one issue that's come up a couple of times, is campfires. So that's, you know, and that can be a smell issue if the smoke's drifting over to the neighbors, but it could also potentially be a fire issue that could be a hazard if somebody leaves it and goes to bed and the campfire's still burning.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, that is great. Are you saying, Joseph, that the hotline is answered by a human being?
Yes, it is.
Oh, terrific. Thank you.
Okay, did somebody have something to?
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest adding signage as an actual under 5.3.
Yeah,
I don't know if you already put that down there, but it's.
I wrote it in my notes.
Great.
I wrote it in my notes.
Just a quick follow-up on the hotline, if it's answered by a person,
Yeah.
and it's not just a recording. If it's something urgent, if it's a noise complaint in the middle of the night, and we've got the, we're looking at the 3-hour reply thing, is that followed up on right away, if it's something that's going on right away? Or is that just something that goes to you regardless of what it is?
Well, it goes to me, but I'm assuming it also goes to the emergency contact for the property.
Okay.
It goes to the contact. If it's emergency, also goes to law enforcement.
I've never got a live person on the call.
You've never got a live person on there?
No, it's always been first of all, the first caveat is this an emergency. Call law, or if it's categorized as an emergency, to call law enforcement, and then it goes into what is the category of issue, and you press a button, and I maybe have only been called late at night, but I only got an automated.
Okay, well,
And-
thank you for that. They're supposed to.
I think that, and then I think that number also is not, it's not front and center with people. I don't know how you get it out there, but I know, and somebody actually approached me in the grocery store 2 weeks ago and said, and I said, did you report it on the number? And they said, where do you get the number? Where's the number?
Yeah, that is our bad. We've been through 2 or 3 iterations of our website, kind of modification and developing it. And so that's not in a prominent location, but you're right. As we get through this, that does need to be listed in a far more prominent location.
And then just in conformance with existing regulations, I know there were several issues last year during the no burn times. During getting information out to property owners about non-burn issues or, sightings with DNR. And I'm wondering if that has a place in that conformance, just a mention of conforming to, safety issues related to.
Yeah, so potentially, yes. It's much easier for us to deal with the county regulations that we have. We've got our ordinance in hand, we've got all of this. The burn regulations, we don't regulate that, so we would need kind of that feedback and that involvement from the people who do, not just the burn reg, but any of the regulations. So we would need that follow-up and involvement, but potentially, ultimately, that could lead to withdrawal suspension of the license and so. That's, again, it comes down to enforcement and the amount of resources we have to be able to put into it.
Right, I just wondering if like in that standards listed in Minnesota statutes and rules,
Yeah.
if there's another section that could be, and, other enforced safety regulations by such and such.
I think we just add them to that one.
Yeah.
Because that's the catch-all.
Is there a way for staff to, like, to the contact person 5.4, disseminate like an automated message when DNR fire standards change, staff could, you could put out an email to this contact list. Is that a possibility? That way you know that all these, I'm trying to think of a way, it's a blanket thing that you could do one blanket email or automated phone call. I keep getting the automated calls from the school type thing. That these contact people, that they've gotten those notifications.
Yeah, no, that's actually that is a good thing to work towards. We clearly don't have that. We need all of the contacts with all of the regulatory entities and all that. And we have to have them express their interest to feed that information into us. And then it does make sense that we would get that put out to the contacts.
The fire thing, for example,
Yeah.
DNR already has an email list that they send out regularly, that all we need to do is go to you or Joseph and Bob's, whoever's gonna disseminate that information, but for example, DNR.
Right. And the one thing that we want to make sure is that is very important. And I would want to commit to working towards that. It's important that what we do for one, we have to do for also, we have to kind of see, how much we can envelop in the other areas that are enforceable as well.
Could it just be another box where it's check, you check it that you have signed up for the, DNR website for all alerts related to fire, so it's self-certifying
Sure.
that I've done, that they've done that.
That would make sense.
On,
Right.
Tim,
Yeah,
uh, being aware of that hotline opportunity, who is it that staffs that? It must be on, intended to be on 24 hours a day. Is that part of the uh, hotline or the hot part of the technology that we're paying for?
That's part of that's a module that we have with Granicus, that they provide that service. And I was surprised that Emily said that there's times she's told and not got a live person, because all the ones that I've listened to that were sent to me was obviously a live person because of the back and forth in the interview process.
Okay, thank you. Tim, just to kind of get a catch area, do you expect we're going to request or suggest or whatever some kind of community information dissemination on this? Because I think some of these things really would answer a lot of questions for general property owners and concerned citizens.
Yeah, no, that's a good question now. And as a matter of fact, we did recently, and I don't want to say recently, it's been a little while since we've hired our communication position, Todd. But we would definitely be working to build out that website a little better. Bob just showed me we do have a page that does list that 24/7 hotline, but you got to look for it, so
Yep.
yeah, it would be nice to have it kind of more centrally located and such. So, yeah, and it's good. It's good that we're having the discussion on the 24 hotline, because it is a part of a cafeteria plan, and we can take it, we can leave it, and frankly, as the last few years, we indicated that the most calls that we've gotten have been for information. How do I get my license or so, which is all nice, but we're paying, for that module. We want it to serve as what it's serving for. So we'd have kicked around, it's like, geez, do we even need this? Do we put a local number on it? We don't want it to go into law enforcement because we don't want to hogging up their time. But I think this discussion here and highlighting it better on the website makes me think that we should just go ahead and keep it and put that out a little more so, and then chastise host compliance or Granicus for not answering that live thing. Go ahead, Hillary.
Well, just a quick question, with this discussion, I'm wondering about having a hotline that you're paying for. Yeah, would it make sense when as you develop this whole packet for owners, that the contact person would be the person who's staying there could contact? So that if you have an issue, if most of the issues are around licensing, then it doesn't make sense to pay for that service, because that could be something easily handled in a different way. If the issues coming up are complaints and concern issues, you really want to have somebody being able to respond to that in whatever time frame that you think is appropriate. So I'm wondering, does it really have a value if it's not being used for complaints, but for compliance? That's the only question I would ask.
Yeah, I tell you, here's my answer to that, and then Emily, you can follow me up on this one. I think there is, because of two things. So listening to the discussion that we have, there are two things that are important for that. Yeah, it's only been a part of information, but it has been a little cagey to find on the website. So we don't know that it could be used for a lot more. Plus, what it does do is it records those calls and then feeds them to us and feeds them to the point of contact. And so I think we want to do this in conjunction of a few things. The phone service that we're paying for on the cafeteria plan is about $2,000. So I think that can be, okay. But we also, in addition to that, kind of load up that signage issue in terms of if you have complaints or if you have emergency or whatever, you do that 24/7 and have that signage in the operation. But then also if somebody calls this number, then we do at least have a record of it. And we can do the follow-up on that to make sure. And if we get enough people calling up on a singular operation, then we've got some basis to be able to take some some further action on. Emily, did you?
I just was wondering about host compliance in general, and, as he's created this dashboard and it's all, we're like self-creating all these tools to do the checks and balances, and is the hotline really working? I mean, is that money well spent in general, or should that be invested in maybe a staff member that would have more of a nuanced position that can do a variety of different things? I don't know anything about the cost of it, but I'm curious as to, looking back now, are we getting good value in general?
Yeah, that is a good question. We end up having this discussion at our annual planners conference across Minnesota, all the different counties we get together each year to talk. And this is one of the topics that we discussed, because some counties, Itasca, I think St. Louis did as well, have dedicated staff time to be able to do this. Now, post compliance, Granicus, what they're called now, they make those wizard bots and they go on and they do all that stuff. In the discussions that I've had with some of these other jurisdictions and I've put out at these conferences, it soaks up a lot of time. They spend a lot of time because you look at an ad, then you have to relook at it to make sure it's still up, or if it's come down, or if you talk to them. So it's pretty labor intensive to maintain that from an internal staff thing when the web bot sites have it just automatically goes out and does that. The overall cost for this service is less than $25,000. So really, it's not been that much of a burden for us, and I think we are getting it. Yes, we do have these seams we need to kind of fill with regards to the information that's out there. The feeling I get when we talk with Granite, maybe you're getting a different feel on that, but I think what I feel is we're a little kind of small potatoes to them. And so they don't necessarily spend as much time, but when we do specific requests and we do ask them, we do get results from them. Is that what you're finding, Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I'm pleased with the service that we get from them. We will be discussing with them a new contract going into 2023. There are some specific issues that we want to bring up that we've run into. But overall, I'm quite pleased with the service.
I love those metrics, how much it costs. It seems like a good value, I guess.
Tim, first of all, I mean, would it be possible, we don't need to get the list right now, but for us all to get a list of what kind of packages they have that we subscribe to, and then as well, what they have available that we're not subscribing to. And then when the discussions were had to create the fee, the licensing fee, was it taken into account the cost of those services and priced according so that it would pay for those charges? I mean, are the permits covering the cost of the service?
So yes, and yes. Yes, you can have a copy of all that stuff. Like I said, it's a cafeteria plan. There's like 6 or 7 or maybe 8 individual item things. The one thing we don't take advantage of is, and I would love to be able to do this, but because we have such a kind of a fickle way of the lodging taxes and the locations and the different districts that they offer a service to collect the lodging taxes as a part of their thing. And that would just be beautiful for us, because then it would be integrated into the whole software thing. But because we have, the LTTA, different from the GTA, they're charged different rates and such. And so it would be a little bit more complex for that. But yeah, I can get that out to everybody so they can see what it is. And yes, it does pay for itself. We had that discussion with the first part of the second meeting where the fee we're collecting of $2,000 or $200 per license per year is paid enough for the services through host compliance and that fragment of Joseph's position that does the administration and enforcement of that. Now, after all this discussion, of course, Administrator York is going to be completely behind the addition of 2 staff members.
Keep talking.
Yeah. And that's why it is important for the discussion of the fees going on into the future. We had talked, I've run some calculations based off of $400. I did state that when we started this program and we had host compliance kind of talking to us through the ordinance and comparing other jurisdictions' ordinances and fee structures, they said we're on the low side. We're on the really low side. Because, oh, there it is right there.
So they gave it to us a per parcel and the total county expense. Do you want me to just, I can attach this when I send out,
Yeah.
this is our first
That's a
meeting
whole
with them.
PowerPoint thing, yeah. No, that's good, yeah, we'll send out, I'll send out the attachment that has the whole rundown and what they do for us and everything like that. So, yeah, as we go forward and run those, calculations in terms of the fee and what we, may want to increase it to, that's part of that consideration, because understanding it's budget time and we have, kind of that, some of the thought is, well, we don't want to pull any general revenue funds out. We want the program to completely pay for itself. And the other side of it is, well, there's not a single program in our department that pays for itself because there's a general public good for it. So that's a discussion that's going to go on between now and the end of the year when the budget gets finally approved as to what that can look like and how much we should rely on the fee structure for that or whatever. Hillary, go ahead.
Just a quick question. What I heard you saying is that it makes sense to keep this fee for emergency contact. And part of the reason is that it has not been prominent on the website. And so the question was, if it's prominent on the website, will it be used for other things other than licensing? And all I'm wondering is that if you're going to do that and it becomes more prominent, I would maybe just looking at who's been using it after you've made this a prominent feature on your website to see if it's still a viable expense that you want to keep doing. That's all I would ask you to do.
Yeah, that's a good point, Hillary. Actually, we do update this agreement every year. So we're able to have stuff drop off and pick stuff up if we want to. And certainly as those calls are recorded and sent to us, it's very easy to keep a tracking of that. Al, I see you came off your mute. Did you have a question or a comment?
Are you talking to me, Tim?
Talking to me? I just saw you come off mute, so I just wondered if you had something to say, but you don't have to.
No, well, I guess I will, since you called attention to it. And we've got a website, which is a passive kind of communication. Somebody has to have a need to go there. I'm wondering, and I just want to put this question to bed or put it at some point. Is there an attempt to inform the Cook County community about all the regulations? Because I believe if there's a information effort, maybe once or twice a year, a lot of the complaints are going to be solved without having to call in and look after them. It just seems like maybe a proactive news release or two per year would help a lot.
Well, thank you, Al, and I think you're correct to an extent. Certainly, the more that we put out, the more information that we put out, the better posture that we have in going through any kind of enforcement process. But in my kind of slightly jaded years of service and in public service, no matter how much information we put out, there are going to be those people that are going to go ahead and violate.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with,
So
I understand. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna, but I think a little effort in that direction could, at least it would be an attempt to proactively deal with disturbance.
Yep, that one I got noted, you betcha.
Thank you.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we'll just kind of keep plugging away here. So 5.4, we talked about that a little bit. Now, what I want to kind of address is there was the concern over the response time. What does that mean? So we have at the bottom of 5.4, which is that last box on that page, it says to respond means to acknowledge notification of an issue, understanding it may take longer to address the issue. And so the concern is, well, someone's not here, they make a call, it's going to take a long time. Well, some of the concerns that are expressed may take, a couple days to fix if it's not an imminent type of concern. But we want maybe some sort of, I was at least kind of understanding or hearing a more rapid sort of immediate response to that. Does anybody want to vocalize that?
I think we're specifically asking for a physical response. I mean, if you think about somebody making a lot of noise or disrupting the neighbors, or if there's like the issues that are raised in this letter here, you needed somebody to be able to physically respond to the property. And if they're trying to respond out of the Twin Cities with a phone call, I just don't think that's going to satisfy the need. So if they want to hire somebody to do that, that's fine. If they want to be up here to do it themselves, that's fine too.
So we need some sort of measurable result. We would say,
I think
okay,
you just add the word physically respond within the time frame that you have in here. I think it takes care of it.
Are there also, from what I understand, there are also requirements on who can be a property manager, right? It's not just, you have to have some qualifications to do that.
Well, that's all.
But do we want to follow that
Yeah.
as part of the ordinance? Because it is, it's
For those that are
it's state law, right?
managing multiple units, I certainly think that, I mean, that is what a property manager does. If manages multiple units, then they should have to follow the same ordinance as, I would say, the statute.
And it is stated in the statute that you have to follow.
Right, and you have to do a broker, and you have to do several, there's a
Insurance
fiduciary
requirements,
responsibility.
county requirements.
I do think though that there are probably like service companies that do like the snow plowing and the cleaning of the units. That might serve as that role as the contact point, but they are not managing the bookings, they're not handling the money and the income. That to me doesn't qualify as something that needs to have a license.
and
I think
correct
if
me
you're
if
cleaning driveways,
But that's already probably been addressed by the legislature on what qualifies, right?
well, correct me if I'm wrong, you need to be a broker if you are doing the management company and stuff like that, but
Or
self-managed, you don't. Is that?
If you're doing it for yourself, you don't. And then if you're managing for others, one of the trigger points that, as I understand it, is when money comes into
Yeah,
play,
right.
then there are different requirements that are there. Now, if you just want to hire somebody to plow your driveway, absolutely you can do that. If it's a full service management situation, or and you're taking money from the public and then dispersing it back to somebody else, then my understanding is that you're supposed to have a broker's license under Minnesota law.
That's what I understood. Okay, so if we just add the physical response into that 5.4. We're good.
I got one more comment on 5.4.
Yes, Mr.
Page. I did write you a note about it. Are you gonna put a placard? Are you gonna require like a placard in each unit? I've talked with the fire chiefs about this. There is a problem. They've seen where people are calling on their cell phones from a vacation rental. And we don't know where they are. The ambulance service does not know how to find them. They don't have any information on their location. It can be on the refrigerator next to the phone, it can have these contact numbers. It can have the hospital number and what their address, their physical address is. If they're calling on a cell phone, the sheriff doesn't have any clue, the dispatcher doesn't have a clue where they are.
Well,
Sounds like a smart way to run a business.
Yeah, that's right.
Very good.
A vacation rental license, we also attached to that email, a certificate to be printed out and supposed to be posted in the unit that shows the owner's name, contact information, and the address of the property. So that should be there. It should be part of the process of the renter or the property owner. Say, this is what you need to do. If there's an emergency, this is the number you call. This is so. I mean, that's all we can do is say, you gotta post your license. And then beyond that, there's a whole notebook that should be in there about what to do.
Yeah, okay, two things real quick, and then Al, it looked like you were gonna have something to say. But that's kind of what I've been talking about, John, with regards to a sign inside. We want to do that. So what I want to be able to have people do is think about the really important information that this committee would like to see on that sign or placard inside of the operation. That's great. I said two things and I had something really important. They told me this would happen when I hit.
I do want to say thank you for going on WTIP every week and making comments about what we're doing. You've been on about every week talking about vacation rental.
I have, and I'm wondering if you're being sarcastic.
No, I'm serious. No, I appreciate you going on and talking.
No, I don't have any press burning comments, but I think that emergency response is very important because people bring their cell phones up, they put it on Wi-Fi calling, and who knows what's going to happen if they call 911? Who knows?
Okay, so
I may-
that's,
I may be, you better put me on mute or something because I'm not sure. Isn't there a place I can raise my hand when I have a question? Because I don't want to interrupt anymore.
yeah, there is actually, if you look down to the bottom, and I know every platform's a little different. There's a little button that says reactions on it. And if you click on that, there's a little thing that says raise hand.
Well,
So you see that?
I have not done that, so sorry about the interruption.
No worries. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody think about what it is that you would like to see on a sign that would be going up inside the cabin for information. Really important information for then we talked about garbage use and everything like that. So section 5.5, I'm trying to burn through. We got 5 minutes. Madam Chair, do you think we'll get should we start wrapping this up, or do you think we could hit? I know the fees are gonna be maybe a bit of a discussion.
You better wrap it up. So we can have a good discussion.
Okay, so we've got 2 full pages left. And then at the end of these 2 pages, what we're going to do is open up for other things that people might want to see. So these are the existing provisions that are on there. And I know some people have sent me suggestions about other things to discuss. And we've not discussed those unless they've kind of fit into part of this discussion. But if there are other things we want to see in terms of performance management and other things like that, we can throw that in. But so look at these next 2 pages going in, and we'll talk about the resort things separately, and hopefully we can send that out to the committee here within a week or so. And unless there are any other questions, Madam Chair, we'll turn it back to you.
Okay, so the next meeting is going now into September, which starts on Friday. Where's the time gone? So September 12th, Monday, September 12th. And you want to do the same time? You agreeable? Yep, no, yep, okay, sounds like it is.
Was that our last meeting?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah,
I got an indication that from Ann that the mid-September is when she wanted to be
Yeah,
expected.
and to address that, I would love for that to be our last meeting, only in terms of the timeline for getting the rest of it kind of completed and hashed through. Because if we do another meeting at the end of September, that means we won't be able to bring our recommendation to the Board of Commissioners until October, mid-October, the second Tuesday in October. And so that pushes everything back. We have to get our agreement with host compliance lined up. We need to do public notices for changes in the ordinance and such. So the further we take, the better a product we're going to end up with, but the more condensed our time is going to be at the end. So we can meet at the end of September. If need be, that would be the 26th or whatever that last Monday would be. It would be nice if we could wrap it up at the next one, but
We could schedule a week after the next one.
we could, and we could also do,
Get this over.
if we get through and plow through enough and we have agreements and all that stuff by the end of the next meeting, I can draft it up and send it out and get feedback via electronically too.
mhm. So be prepared for the discussion.
Is there anything extra you can do to get the health department here? I think that would be important to get them here.
I'm sorry,
Is there anything extra you can do to get the health department here to?
I'm trying, it's funny because, they had been told, that they wouldn't be able to use the Zoom platform, that they were kind of restricted to Teams. But I did a practice meeting with them, this last week. and it worked out fine. So they're going to be able to participate with us via Zoom. And it's just a matter of timing of getting them on. So they know when the next two meetings are. And they said there's a how much higher likelihood they'd be able to participate at the end of September. So I'm kind of resigning myself to think that we'll probably have a meeting and then really scramble to get everything changed by that point. But there's a possibility where they could be with us in mid-September.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you up there on the screen.
TV land.
Hey, thanks, Al. Thank you very much.
Can you still, get me out for the next? Yes.
Can I get in there?